Hey guys, tonight we time travel back to one of the grandest cities the ancient world ever knew, Tang Dynasty Chang'an. In the early 9th century, the air is misty and cool. The walls are tall and golden with dust, and the rhythms of ancient life beat softly just beyond the eastern gate. This evening, you won't be a warrior, or a scholar, or a poet, though there'll be poetry. Don't worry. You're here to tend a garden, a small, fragrant, sacred space filled with herbs and blossoms that can heal the body and soothe the soul. Just taught we not to invent electricity by accident, P. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you feel is the weight of morning fog on your skin. You're standing just beyond the great eastern gate of Chang'an Gate, they call it, and everything is golden grey in the light of early dawn. Tall stone walls rise behind you, etched with ware and watchful carvings. Ox carts creak past you slowly, their wheels muddy from a long road. A merchant is untying bundles of fragrant dried mushrooms. A boy is leading a donkey with a saddle full of persimmons. The scent of wet earth mingles with steamed millet wafting from somewhere inside the city. You're wearing unfamiliar sandals and rough-woven travel robes, but they fit you as though they've always belonged to you. You reach instinctively for your waist. There's a leather pouch. Inside, a slip of paper with a temple seal, a few copper coins, and a name written in elegant brushstrokes. You can't read it, but it feels like an invitation. You move with the flow of the crowd, and no one seems to think you're out of place. It's a good sign. A procession of Buddhist monks walks barefoot nearby, murmuring softly. You catch their rhythms slow, contemplative, like the heartbeat of the city itself. Not far ahead, you see a quiet figure leaning against a wooden stall that smells of herbs and sandalwood. She's elderly, wearing deep blue robes, and her grey hair is tied back in a simple twist. She sees you, really sees you, and her face softens in recognition. "Come," she says, without preamble, as though you've merely returned from an errand. "The garden needs hands, and the roots are thirsty today." You know, what else is there to do but follow? She leads you down a side alley shaded by plum trees. The petals from yesterday's wind still scattered like confetti along the stones. You pass a man pulling water from a well, an older woman polishing wooden sandals, and 3 children chasing a paper kite. Even though the wind is barely strong enough to lift it, there's a softness here, a calm urgency, like the city is always humming under its breath. You arrive at a wooden gate nestled between 2 walls of crumbling red brick. Beyond it lies a narrow path lined with low flowering bushes and a carved stone basin filled with rainwater. The temple rises gently behind the garden, its eaves curved like the wings of a phoenix, its silence deep and forgiving. The woman introduces herself as Mistress Wei. She gestures for you to kneel beside the basin and wash your hands. The water is cool and clear, with petals floating lazily on the surface. You inhale. Is that osmanthus, or honeysuckle, or some herb you've never known until now? As you dry your hands on a linen cloth, she passes you a robe the colour of soft tea leaves and motions for you to change in the corner room. It fits. Of course it does. She pours tea into 2 small porcelain cups, the kind that fit perfectly in your palms, as if made for quiet mornings like this. Jasmine, delicate and smooth, with just a hint of bitterness at the end, like waking up from a dream. You sit with her beneath the awning, watching 2 birds flit between garden posts. She doesn't ask questions, neither do you. Instead, she speaks softly about what blooms in this season. Angelica for the blood, chrysanthemum for the eyes, huangqi for strength in late autumn. It's nearly time for the ghost festival, she murmurs. People will come looking for comfort. We must be ready. You glance out at the tangled rows of green, the wooden trellises holding vines steady, the woven trays stacked neatly by the wall. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls low and steady, perhaps from the temple itself. You breathe in again. This doesn't feel like the past. It feels like stepping into the part of yourself that's been asleep for years. And just for a moment, you wonder, what would the people of this city think of your old world? The phones, the buzzing, the asphalt heat. Would they laugh? Would they mourn? Mistress Wei stands and brushes her hands on her robe. Come now, she says. Let's show you the angelica. You rise, steady and curious, and the garden awaits. And for now, time is nowhere near as important as morning dew and the promise of new leaves. You follow Mistress Wei through a narrow archway of bamboo trellises, their canes clicking gently in the morning breeze. Beyond it lies the true heart of the garden, a living, breathing quilt of green and gold, neatly divided into small plots with raised edges of smooth, river-worn stones. Each section seems to hum with a quiet energy. You kneel at the edge of the first bed, where Angelica sinensis grows in tall, elegant stalks. Its feathery leaves quiver in the breeze, and the soil beneath it smells dark and rich. Mistress Wei kneels beside you, gracefully, for someone her age, and begins to loosen the earth around a root with a narrow wooden spade. She shows you how to follow the contours of the plant without damaging its body. Every movement is deliberate, respectful, as if the plant might bruise from impatience. You copy her, and the soil yields. The root is pale, gnarled like a hand, and smooth as polished stone. She places it gently into a woven basket lined with mulberry paper. Angelica for the womb, the blood, the tired spirit, she says, but only when prepared carefully. You nod, not because you understand yet, but because her voice makes everything feel worth listening to. Nearby, a low, rhythmic tapping begins. You glance over and see a young temple acolyte splitting stalks of bamboo into narrow slivers beside the garden's edge. He looks up briefly, gives you a small nod, then returns to his work. You notice he's barefoot, even in the morning chill. Mistress Wei sees you watching. That's Brother Shen. He's learning silence. She smiles, half amused. It's not going well. You chuckle under your breath. It feels good to laugh, even if it's quiet and brief. The next bed is filled with huangqi astragalus, shorter plants, with sturdy stems and bright green leaves arranged like tiny ladders. Mistress Wei instructs you on how to check for pests. Turn a leaf gently. Brush the underside with a soft bamboo whisk. She explains that ladybugs are welcome, ants are tolerated, but beetles are politely escorted elsewhere. There's a cloth pouch for that purpose. You may speak to the plants, she says, but they prefer you not to brag. You stifle a smile. By mid-morning, you've moved through 3 plots. Your sleeves are flecked with damp soil, and your knees are comfortably sore. Birds rustle the fig trees by the wall, and the sun begins to press more warmly on your back. Mistress Wei hands you a damp cloth. Tea time again? Then I'll show you the drying trays. You retreat beneath the awning where the tea waits, slightly cooled but still fragrant. And this time, it's chrysanthemum light yellow petals swirling in warm water, tasting slightly sweet and faintly of hay. The wind carries in the faint scent of something smoky, perhaps incense from the temple, or someone's breakfast fire farther down the lane. You sip, and your thoughts soften like silk in warm hands. I was your age once, Mistress Wei says. I had a garden in Luoyang before the floods came. I planted ginger and garlic then, herbs for food, not healing, but the ground was generous. It taught me to be slower. You glance at her hands. They are lined like maps of work and weather. Plants and people, she continues, they both take root when you're kind to them. That's all you really need to remember. It's the kind of wisdom that lands without explanation, the kind you carry without noticing. The rest of the morning passes gently. You help arrange the first few harvested roots onto shallow bamboo trays for drying, each with its own embroidered silk label in black ink. Mistress Wei shows you how to angle them slightly, so the wind doesn't gather dust on the surface. She laughs softly when you nearly drop a tray. Even mistakes have their seasons, she says. As you crouch once more to rinse your hands at the stone basin, you notice the water glistens with the reflection of something white in the sky. You look up. A kite this time, held aloft by a stronger breeze, floats far overhead. It's shaped like a carp, trailing red ribbons from its mouth. And you wonder briefly if it remembers the boy who flew it this morning. One of the most surprising things about this new world isn't how different it is, but how familiar it feels. The rhythm of earth and tea, the way your body aches and stretches in the garden air, the quiet rituals of daily kindness. It's as if you've been here before, or maybe you've just been waiting to arrive. Mistress Wei places a hand gently on your shoulder. Tomorrow, she says, we'll visit the market. But today, rest a little. There is time. You glance once more at the rows of growing herbs, at the swaying stalks of mint, and at a small wooden tag stuck into the ground, etched with characters you can't read, but somehow feel like a welcome. You take a breath, and the garden breathes with you. You awaken to the soft rustle of silk and the muffled cooing of doves in the rafters. The wooden shutters are slightly ajar, letting in ribbons of morning light that slice gently across the floor. Somewhere, a bamboo chime clinks lazily in the breeze, and the scent of wet stone and fresh ginger lingers faintly in the air. You stretch slowly, feeling your limbs acclimate to a pace that belongs entirely to this world, a world where time seems to fold over itself like a well-made dumpling. You slip into your garden robes, still faintly herb-scented from yesterday. There's a small note left beside a bowl of warm water and a slice of rice cake. The characters are painted in confident brushstrokes, and though you can't read them, you imagine it says something like, eat first, and then breathe. You do both. The courtyard is empty when you step into it, but not still. Bees are already at work among the flowering bushes, and two temple cats, one orange and one dramatically indifferent, stroll past you with practiced grace. You follow the sound of water to the back well, where Mistress Wei is drawing up a heavy bucket with the ease of someone who has done it 1,000 times. She offers you a ladle. You drink. The water is cool, mineral-rich, and tastes faintly of the ceramic lining of the vessel. It quenches in a way that modern drinks never quite do. You remember the first sip you had when you arrived here. How different it felt. Now it's familiar, comforting, like a friend who waits in the quiet. Today, Mistress Wei says, we go to the market, but not for showy things. We need thread, ginger root, and a few sweet oranges. And, perhaps, a little gossip. You smile, she winks. You leave the garden through a back lane, past low clay walls covered in creeping ivy. The city is already humming. Merchants fan coals under steam pots. Donkey carts clip past. A woman balances baskets on a shoulder pole, the rhythm of her footsteps clicking in time with the rustle of dried lotus pods. The market is nestled between two temple halls and spills across the flagstone like a river in flood. It's a mosaic of colours, fabrics and smells. Dried plums, roast duck, ink sticks and brass combs. You pause before a stall where a boy is shaping pine resin into incense coils. The smoke curls from his fingers like a conjuring trick. Mistress Wei haggles gently with a thread vendor over spools dyed in natural indigo and persimmon peel. You notice how effortlessly she navigates the exchange, one eyebrow raised, lips pursed in mock skepticism. They know each other, clearly, but the vendor throws in a scrap of silk as a bonus. You're handed a bundle of ginger root to carry firm, knotted, and smelling of pepper and lemon. The oranges come next, picked from a crate cushioned with straw. You can't help but steal one for later. You plan to eat it by the water basin, slowly, with juice on your fingers and nowhere else to be. As you pass a stall selling painted fans, you overhear two older women debating the merits of jasmine over sandalwood for summer sachets. One declares that sandalwood smells like old men in court robes. The other insists jasmine is too romantic for people who live alone. Mistress Wei chuckles, her eyes bright. This, she says, is why we shop in person. You pause at a stand where a calligrapher is writing single-character fortunes on slips of red paper. He offers you one word for a coin. You hand him one of the coppers from your pouch, and he paints a simple, powerful character with swift precision. Jink, jink, meaning stillness. You don't know it yet, but you'll keep that slip tucked in your robe pocket for the rest of your time here. On your way back, you pass a group of children practicing poetry recitation in a shaded courtyard. Their voices rise and fall like birds over water. One girl stumbles on a line and her friend elbows her in theatrical despair. Everyone giggles. You realize that even in this world, childhood sounds the same. As you turn a corner toward the garden lane, Mistress Wei asks you a question in her warm, gravelly voice. What would you have done with a morning like this? Back in your old world. You pause. The answer doesn't come quickly. You think about screens, cars, coffee rushed between obligations, the buzz of a life that rarely lets you hear your own breath. Maybe nothing, you say softly. Then today is already an improvement, she replies. You return home not to a hotel, not to a guest room, but to a space that now carries the faint, warm shape of your presence. You unpack the ginger and thread and place the oranges in a small clay bowl by the window. The sun warms their pebbled skins, and the scent fills the room with a kind of brightness. Later, you sit in the garden again, mending a tear in your robe with new thread. A bee lands on the edge of your sleeve and stays a moment, as if to inspect your work. You do not swat it away. You wonder not for the first time if you'll ever truly go back, or if part of you will always kneel in this garden, threading stillness through fabric and sipping morning light, one drop at a time. Mistress Wei says that the garden always knows when you're paying attention.
This morning, you test her theory.
The air is still cool as you step barefoot into the rows of planted herbs. Your feet sink slightly into the damp soil, soft as steamed buns and just as yielding. Overhead, a fine mist clings to the leaves, and every breath tastes faintly of mint, loam, and old rain. Today, Mistress Wei hands you a soft brush made of fine horsehair and points to the tall cluster of chrysanthemum pateicate plants blooming like pale suns across the garden's southern wall. Gently, she says, as if brushing the cheek of someone you owe an apology. You get the feeling she's speaking from experience. With each stroke, yellow petals shift and release a bittersweet fragrance into the morning air. Bees hover nearby, nonchalant and busy. Their presence is somehow reassuring. Even their tiny buzzing seems to carry purpose. Mistress Wei sits on a stool nearby, sorting dried angelica roots with the ease of someone sorting memories. You steal a glance at her and marvel at how she never seems in a hurry, but never wastes a moment either. She begins to tell you about the properties of chrysanthemum cooling, cleansing, soothing to the eyes. It keeps the scholar's sight clear, she says, and the heart from boiling over. You consider how many people in your world might benefit from a flower like that. As you work, you notice how tactile this world is. You are constantly touching things earth, leaf, fabric, stone. Nothing happens behind glass. Everything requires your hands, your breath, your care. The body is fully involved in the day, not just along for the ride. You find yourself reaching toward a nearby plant with delicate white blossoms. Mistress Wei raises an eyebrow. Not that one. That's wusuli. Looks lovely. But upset stomachs and strange dreams follow. Always know the leaf before you pick it. Duly noted. She tells you an old Chang'an saying, "The fool picks with hunger, the wise with respect." It strikes you as oddly modern, or perhaps your world just forgot how to phrase it that well. After a while, she brings out 2 shallow woven trays and shows you how to spread the freshly clipped flowers in even layers so they dry without curling. The trays are placed on low stands beneath a linen canopy protected from both sun and wind. You feel a quiet satisfaction arranging them just right. It's like writing a letter in a language made of petals. Careful not to sneeze, Mistress Wei warns, not without humour. I once lost half a tray that way. A tragic chrysanthemum storm. You laugh, surprising yourself with the ease of it.
Then here she shows you the next step, boiling a tonic.
Inside the temple's side kitchen, a single pot simmers over a charcoal stove, and the kitchen smells of dried herbs and clay and the faintest trace of vinegar. She adds dried huang qi and a thin slice of ginger to the pot, then gestures for you to add a few fresh chrysanthemum petals. You watch the flowers float and swirl like little boats in the steam. There's a rhythm to this. 2. Add, wait, stir, taste, adjust. It's not so different from the way your mind works in the quiet of night, taking in thoughts, letting them steep. She hands you a ceramic cup. You sip. It tastes slightly floral, with a dry edge that lingers like a lesson you almost learned. It warms your throat and settles low in your belly.
Made correctly, she says. It cools the heat in the body but strengthens the breath.
You wonder again what people from this era would think of your old life, your fast pills, your meal replacement drinks, your caffeinated coping mechanisms. Would they marvel or would they worry?
Outside, the sun has fully risen, the garden glows.
Mistress Wei excuses herself to speak with a visiting monk. You stay behind, alone in the kitchen, listening to the pot's low bubbling and the occasional flap of bird wings outside the window. On a small shelf, you spot an odd little bundle, dried herbs tied with twine and shaped like a rabbit. Curious. You bring it outside and ask Mistress Wei about it. She grins. Ah, for the ghost festival. Sachets shaped like creatures and ancestors, filled with protective herbs. Keeps mischief away. You press it to your nose. Lavender, mugwort, orange peel. The scent is strange, sharp and calming all at once. Smells like memory, you say. Mistress Wei tilts her head. Yes, that's what most healing is. You return to the garden to clean the tools and brush the stone basin. The water glints with morning light. The bees are still at work. The petals on the trays are drying just so. And as you move between these quiet tasks, you feel something shift to not a grand transformation, no choir of realization, no swirling magic. Just a deeper settling.
As if the garden has begun to recognize you. As if the soil remembers your hands.
Just like the first water you drank here, this life doesn't announce itself. It simply welcomes you, one quiet day at a time. By midday, the garden grows drowsy with sun. The heat arrives not like a wave, but a warm hush, slipping gently over the tiled roofs and creeping into the folds of your sleeves. Even the bees have quieted, settling on leaves in pause rather than frenzy. The shadows shrink toward the base of the temple walls, and the scent of blooming osmanthus sweetens the still air. Mistress Wei rests in the shade of the pagoda now, peeling long strips of tangerine rind to dry for later use. Go walk the courtyard, she murmurs. The monks are ringing the bells soon. It's good to listen now and then, instead of always doing. You nod, and for once, it's easy to obey. You slip off your sandals and walk slowly along the shaded corridor that curves around the temple's edge. The coolness of the flagstones seeps through your soles. Every few paces, a carved wooden pillar stands with weathered inscriptions, poems, mantras, tiny prayers. You run your fingers lightly over the grooves, wondering how many others have traced the same lines. To your left, the inner courtyard opens like a breath held too long. A large stone lantern rises at its center, and beyond it, a wide wooden platform holds a small gathering of monks, each seated in meditation. Their robes form rippling pools of saffron and ash brown. Not one of them moves. You sit on the edge of the walkway and watch. The silence is so complete, you start to hear things you normally miss: the creak of the old timber, the flap of a bird's wing, the soft clink of someone adjusting prayer beads in their lap.
Then the bell.
It begins with a single tone, low, resonant, impossibly deep. It doesn't sound like metal. It sounds like time itself remembering to breathe. The second strike follows slowly, echoing outward until the birds stop mid-song. You feel it in your chest more than your ears. The bell continues, slowly, 9 times. You count them without meaning to, as if each chime is a thread weaving you more firmly into this world. When the final tone fades, a soft wind stirs the trees, and a few golden leaves tumble across the courtyard like scattered thoughts. One monk opens his eyes, meets your gaze, and smiles. Nothing more. Just a nod, as if to say, yes, you're here. You wander farther, past a row of wind chimes that tinkle delicately in a covered corridor. You reach a side room with wooden sliding screens half open, revealing a shrine inside. It's quiet, but not empty. There's incense burning slowly in a clay holder shaped like a mountain, and beside it, a plate of dried dates and sunflower seeds, small offerings left with care. You step inside, hands respectfully folded, and kneel before the shrine. The smell of sandalwood wraps around you like a shawl. You think again of your old world, where silence is rare and stillness is usually mistaken for inaction. But here, both are cultivated like herbs in shaded rows. You wonder, what if we've been confusing stillness with stagnation all along? Behind you, soft footsteps, it's Mistress Wei.
Some days, she says quietly, I come here just to let my ears rest.
You both sit there a while, saying nothing. The incense curls upward, steady and unwavering. You remember the sachet shaped like a rabbit, still tucked into your sleeve, and gently squeeze it. The scent is fainter now, but no less comforting. Later, she walks with you through the temple's outer walkway, pointing out niches where birds nest and tiny carvings of dragons hiding beneath the eaves. This one, she says, pointing to a grinning stone lion, has a cracked fang. Children rub it for luck. Not that it's ever helped the lion. You both laugh again, quietly. Back in the garden, the sun has shifted westward. The shadows stretch long across the soil, and a temple cat naps shamelessly on one of the herb-drying trays. Mistress Wei shoos it away with a sigh. You pour water into the stone basin and rinse your hands slowly. The bell's resonance is still somewhere in your chest, echoing like a memory not yet finished. As you sit beside the basin sipping a fresh cup of chrysanthemum tea, a small breeze lifts the edge of the robe around your wrist. The stitched seam catches the light. It's peaceful in a way that feels earned, not given, not bought, just found again and again, in the way water refills a bowl. And the city beyond the garden, you realize you haven't thought about it in hours. Perhaps that's the secret of this place.
It never hurries, never asks, but it always offers.
Mistress Wei wakes you earlier than usual the next morning. The sky is still that pale, colourless blue that comes just before dawn dares to show her face. She hands you a shallow basket and wraps a silk cord around your robe. Today, she says, we walk beyond the gate. The market's in bloom. You blink sleep from your eyes and follow her out the side door. The alley is hushed, and only the temple cats seem truly awake. One of them slinks alongside your ankles like it's checking your form. You suspect it's judging you. As you walk, the city begins to rise around you. A woodcarver opens his stall and stretches his arms wide, as if embracing the day itself. A girl with lacquered hair rushes past with an armful of parasols. Smoke from breakfast cookfires floats low, and sweet in the air sticky rice, barley gruel, and fried scallions. You pass a painted archway you hadn't noticed before, its eaves decorated with red silk ribbons and jade wind bells. A trio of children are already playing a tile game in its shadow, using hushed voices and fierce concentration.
And then, suddenly, you arrive.
The market opens before you like a fan, wide and colourful and endlessly layered. It spills into side alleys and courtyards, filling the entire square like water poured onto stone. Stalls are draped in bright cloth, some of it faded by time and sun. Lattice-work canopies ripple in the breeze, casting patterned shadows on baskets of persimmons and split bamboo. Mistress Wei moves like water, slow but impossible to stop. She nods to some vendors, exchanges jokes with others. Remember his face. She whispers about one salt merchant. He once charged me double for dried fish and still insists he didn't. You can't help smiling. She's clearly in her element. She pauses at a spice stall and has you smell a bundle of toasted huajiao Sichuan peppercorns. The scent tingles at the back of your throat, sharp and citrusy. For sachets, she explains, to keep moths away and nosy neighbours guessing. Next, she guides you to a silk vendor where skeins of hand-dyed thread gleam like ribbons of cloud at sunset. She fingers a skein of pale yellow, osmanthus dyed, she murmurs, for temple embroidery. They say it brings clarity of thought. You run your fingers over the threads where they're warm from the sun, almost weightless. A single thread could weave through time itself, you think. You pause at a table where a young man sells painted clay whistles shaped like birds. You pick one up blue and white, shaped like a kingfisher, and gently blow. It trills softly, a sound like water skipping across stone. The vendor bows slightly and presses a second whistle into your palm. For balance, he says, a bird alone cannot sing in harmony. You tuck it carefully into your robe. The market gets louder as the sun rises. The performers begin to gather near the square's centre. A blind man plucking a two-stringed erhu, a juggler balancing ceramic bowls, a poet writing verses on fans for couples, breathing pulses with life and colour. Yet even amid the noise, there's no sense of rush. Everyone here knows what they came for, and they'll get it in time. Mistress Wei buys orange peels and dried licorice root, then insists on showing you a stall that sells ink stones carved into strange shapes, a turtle, a plum blossom, a grumpy-looking scholar with his chin in his hand. He reminds me of you, she says, pointing to the scholar, always thinking, not enough napping. You laugh. You're not sure if it's true, but it feels earned. Then she turns serious. But this market has been here longer than I've had teeth, and it will still be here when I am nothing but a story. Remember what it feels like, being here, not with your mind here. She taps your chest. You close your eyes for a moment and listen distant music, chimes in the wind, laughter rising and falling like breath. You smell candied hawthorn and sandalwood ash. The stone underfoot is warm now. Somewhere, a rooster crows at the wrong time. When you open your eyes, she's already walking ahead, basket in hand. You catch up, and together, you stroll back through winding streets where the city's edges blur into quiet again. Back at the garden, you help her unbundle the purchases, sorting dried herbs into ceramic jars and looping silk thread over low, wooden frames. She hands you a candied plum, its sweetness cut with salt, and you chew slowly as the morning settles around you like a silken robe. And later, as you rinse your hands in the basin and lay your new whistles beside your sleeping mat, you realize you didn't miss anything from your old world today.
Not once.
By midday, but the garden is heavy with light. Not hot, exactly just full. Sunlight drips through the leaves like warm tea, pooling on the ground and glinting off the rims of the herb-drying trays. The shadows of vines dance lazily across the wall, and a cricket somewhere insists on keeping rhythm, even if no one else is listening. Today, Mistress Wei decides it's time to prepare remedies. You sit cross-legged on a flat stone near the garden's southern edge. Before you is a wooden tray filled with dried angelica root, thin slices of ginger, and a few precious curls of wild ginseng. Nearby, a mortar and pestle wait patiently, smoothed smooth from years of use. You run your fingers along its rim. It feels like history, polished by hands. Mistress Wei hands you a small scroll with calligraphy you still can't read, but she narrates as she moves. This blend is for easing breath and calming the stomach, for grief that hides in the ribs. You blink at that. She doesn't explain further. With practiced hands, she begins showing you how to crush the ginger, just enough not into dust, but into broken bits that release scent and heat. Then, she has you take over. The pestle is heavier than it looks. Your rhythm is uneven at first, too timid, then too enthusiastic. Eventually, you find a tempo that matches your breath.
Tap, press, pause. Tap, press, breathe.
It becomes oddly meditative, like a lullaby for your thoughts. As you work, she fetches a pot and fills it with water from the well. She adds a pinch of dried chrysanthemum petals, the crushed herbs you prepared, and a few drops of thick honey that smells faintly floral ju hua mi. She tells you, honey from bees that feed only on autumn chrysanthemums. You stir the mixture slowly as it heats over a charcoal brazier. The scent rises in layers, first sharp, then mellow, then something almost like cedar. You lean over and inhale. The steam coats your face, and for a moment, you feel like a dumpling being properly prepared. Mistress Wei laughs when you tell her that. Well, a dumpling is just an herb pouch with ambition. You both laugh, and something inside you softens again. When the remedy is ready, she pours it into 2 shallow cups. It's bitter, but not unpleasant, like honesty that doesn't need sugar. You sip slowly, watching a small lizard dart across the garden path and pause to blink at you, unbothered. She hands you a cloth pouch and instructs you to fill it with a pinch of each dried ingredient: mint, dried tangerine peel, ginger, and sandalwood. Not for drinking, she says, for carrying. Pocket calm. You breathe in the blend before tying the pouch shut. The scent settles low in your chest, grounding you in a way your old world never quite managed. It smells like clean thought and late summer. She takes out a small reed pen and carefully writes your name, at least what she's decided to call you, on a slip of mulberry paper. She tucks it into the pouch. You wear it on your belt, and it feels like carrying a secret. Later that afternoon, you help hang fresh herbs on a wooden lattice for drying. The mint leaves curl gently at the edges as they begin to lose their moisture. The honeysuckle, pale and delicate, clings to its shape a little longer. Mistress Wei tells you that some people believe herbs carry the memory of every hand that's touched them, that a well-prepared blend holds not just healing, but a trace of the healer's intentions. You think of your own hands, still learning, still unsure, but present, willing, and maybe that's enough. As the sun begins to lower behind the temple roof, she places a warm cloth over the last tray and sits beside you.
You're settling in, she says.
You nod, not needing to explain how. You just are. You'll always be in motion, she adds, even when you're still. It's how life works. But it's good to learn what stillness feels like, too.
A nearby gong sounds soft and distant. You don't flinch this time. You simply sip the last of your tonic, feeling the warmth settle into your limbs.
The garden quiets. The world hushes. And somewhere, beyond the walls of time, your old life grows smaller. Not erased, just folded, carefully, into the seams of a new rhythm. Like a pouch of herbs, stitched and sealed, full of things not said but always carried.
Evening arrives not with fanfare, but with quiet confidence.
It spreads through the garden like a familiar guest, draping everything in cooler tones, dusty blue shadows, soft gold light, the faint lavender hush of a day unwinding. The warmth of the sun lingers on the stones, but the breeze has shifted. It smells of clay rooftops and faint incense, something spicy, something old. Mistress Wei sets a woven lantern on the edge of the garden path and lights it with a thin taper. The flame flickers inside like a sleeping firefly. We'll walk a bit tonight, she says. Too fine an evening to stay put. You trade your garden robe for a slightly finer one, a soft brown with faded embroidery along the cuffs. Nothing extravagant, just respectable enough for strolling. You fasten your herb pouch to the sash and follow her into the narrowing dusk. The alleys of Chang'an at twilight feel like a secret only some people are invited to know. Gone is the bustling morning crowd, their place the quiet sweep of brooms, the low clatter of dishes, children's laughter fading behind wooden doors, lanterns flicker into being one by one, casting warm pools of light across worn flagstones. Fireflies answer in kind from behind garden walls. You and Mistress Wei turn into a lane filled with the scent of sesame oil and star anise. A vendor ladles broth into shallow bowls for a line of temple visitors. He nods at you as you pass, and you nod back, unsure if he knows you, but somehow you know him. A zither melody drifts from a second-story window above a closed tea shop. The tune is slow and playful, like someone remembering a joke in musical form. Mistress Wei hums along under her breath. Sounds like Master Liu's daughter. She says she never learned to read but can play any song after hearing it once. Some people have music instead of memory. You reach a small square where elderly neighbors have gathered beneath a ginkgo tree. They sip tea from chipped bowls and argue gently over whether pears are better steamed or raw. One of them offers you a slice without asking who you are. You accept. It's crisp, cold, from soaking in spring water, and sweeter than anything from a market stall. You walk like you've lived here longer than you know. An old man tells you. His voice sounds like shoes on gravel. You thank him, even if you're not sure it's true. As the sky deepens to ink, you and Mistress Wei pass a row of silk banners fluttering gently above a low archway. Each banner bears a painted phrase, some poetic, others humorous. One reads, "To walk slowly is to arrive sooner than expected." You smile. This city has its own sense of time, and you finally stop trying to correct it. A nearby stall sells tiny lacquer boxes decorated with inlaid mother-of-pearl, each the size of a plum. The merchant, an old woman with hands stained from decades of dye work, beckons you over. Mistress Wei watches from a step behind, arms crossed in that quietly amused way of hers. "You're from the quiet garden," the merchant says softly. "It's not a question." You nod. She opens one of the boxes and places a pinch of dried osmanthus inside. Then she shuts it gently and holds it out to you. "For your dreams," she says. "Even gardens travel." You bow in thanks and tuck the box into your sash. It clicks softly as you walk, a kind of lullaby just for you. On your way back, you pass a man lighting paper lanterns along the curve of a narrow bridge. Each one reflects in the canal below, turning the water into a constellation of floating suns. One lantern catches on the wind and lifts briefly before falling into the current. It bobs once, twice, then drifts away like a thought you chose not to keep. You and Mistress Wei return to the temple just as the last bell rings for the night. Its chime feels softer now, as if saving its strength for tomorrow. Back in the garden, you light one last lantern and place it near the drying trays. The petals inside have curled just so, pale gold and feather soft. They seem to rest as deeply as you feel. You sit by the stone basin and breathe. The wind has settled. The garden sleeps. And somewhere in the alley beyond, the zither song fades with the night.
Rain arrives like an unexpected guest, unannounced, but welcomed all the same.
You wake to the hush of it, a soft tapping against the paper-panelled window, the kind of gentle rain that asks nothing of you but to listen. You stay lying down for a while, watching water trace paths down the sill, as if the sky were writing something in a script you almost understand. There's no rush this morning. The garden data seems to understand. You slip into your robe, tie your sash, and step barefoot onto the stone threshold. The rain is light but steady, creating 100 tiny rivers down the clay walls and the bamboo posts of the herb trellises. Even the cats are hiding somewhere warm and dry. Mistress Wei greets you from beneath the eaves with 2 cups of tea. She hands you one without a word. The steam curls upward like a gentle spell, carrying the scent of smoked plum and goji berry. You sip, and the flavor is deep, mellow, almost brooding. "Today is a dumpling day," she says, matter of fact. You raise an eyebrow. For rain, for rest, for remembering the body. She says it like a proverb, though you suspect she just wants dumplings. The kitchen is warm and fragrant when you step inside. Clay jars line the walls, filled with dried mushrooms, salted turnips, and mysterious pickles you haven't yet dared to ask about. The brazier crackles quietly in the corner, heating a pot of broth that smells like ginger and dreams. You help her chop ingredients at a wide wooden board near the window: fresh chives, diced tofu, a handful of black mushrooms rehydrated in warm tea. The rhythm of the knife is calming, almost musical. People think herbs only heal when dried and brewed, Mistress Wei says, but food is also medicine, especially when shared. You knead the dough under her watchful eye, gently but firmly. The way she taught you to handle soil, it sticks to your fingers in the most satisfying way. You roll it out, cut small circles, and begin the slow, hypnotic work of folding dumplings. She shows you how to pinch the edges like a fan, creating delicate ridges that catch the broth later. Yours are a little lopsided. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to. One look at her amused smile is enough. By midday, you have a tray of perfect and imperfect dumplings alike, ready for steaming. Rain patters gently against the wooden beams above, and the air fills with the scent of rising dough and sesame oil. As the dumplings steam, Mistress Wei tells you a story about a monk who once fasted for 30 days, only to break his silence for a single bite of plum vinegar dumplings. Some hungers, she says, are holy. You eat together seated cross-legged near the window, watching the rain trace patterns on the herb-drying trays, now stacked under shelter. The dumplings are soft, chewy, and full of flavor. Each bite feels earned.
A knock at the garden gate.
You and Mistress Wei exchange glances before she stands and answers it. A young monk stands there, soaked from the shoulders down, holding a scroll wrapped in oilskin and a sheepish grin. Delivery from the North Temple, he says. They promised it yesterday. Mistress Wei takes the scroll and hands him a small cloth pouch for your trouble. He sniffs it. Dried ginger.
And star anise, put it in your shoes tonight.
He bows deeply, thanks her, and disappears down the alley, his robe clinging to his knees. You help her unroll the scroll on the dry table. It's a list of herbs requested by the temple apothecary, half for remedies, half for festival offerings. Mistress Wei sighs. They always wait until the rain, she mutters, but you can see the soft fondness in her expression. You spend the afternoon preparing packets, carefully measuring dried mint, lotus leaf, ginseng, and powdered licorice into paper wraps. You seal them with twine and ink stamps. The rhythm is soothing. Outside, the rain slows. The garden sparkles, fresh and green, as if the world had been rinsed and polished. You step outside and tilt your face upward. The last drops fall like cool punctuation. Mistress Wei joins you, carrying a pair of bamboo umbrellas.
Come, she says. Let's walk once before the sky changes its mind.
You stroll slowly through the garden path, umbrellas overhead, droplets falling from leaf tips, the scent of wet soil and crushed mint rising with each step. The stone basin is overflowing now, its surface rippling softly. A floating osmanthus blossom spins in lazy circles, like it's remembering something. Too. And you wonder how many days like this did you rush through in your old life? How many rains did you ignore? Here, the rain is not an inconvenience. It's a rhythm, a pause, a recipe, all its own.
Night falls gently over the temple garden.
There's no dramatic sunset, just a gradual dimming, as if someone is lowering the wick on the sky. The lanterns have already been lit, their warm circles of amber light drawing soft boundaries between light and dark, between waking and rest. You kneel beside the herb trays, now shifted back into the open air. The mint leaves have dried into curled silver-green shells, and the honeysuckle is nearly ready, pale yellow blossoms turned papery and sweet-smelling. You lift a petal to your nose and breathe it in. It smells faintly of dusk and sugar, and something else you can't name. Not memory, not longing. Something quieter than either. Mistress Wei joins you carrying a small oil lamp, which she sets beside the trays. "You've a patient hand," she says, inspecting the herbs. "Not everyone takes the time to listen." You look up at her, surprised. "To herbs?" "To anything," she replies. The lamp's flame flickers slightly, catching the light in her eyes. You wonder how many years she's sat here at this hour, watching things dry, watching things grow. There's a quiet reverence in the way she moves, no ceremony, but nothing careless either.
"I've always liked this hour," she says, sitting beside you. "The day doesn't rush anymore. Even mistakes don't mind being remembered."
You smile. That sounds like something she's said before. You fetch a small writing board from inside the storeroom. On it are a few sheets of mulberry paper, a brush, and a shallow dish of ink. Mistress Wei shows you how to hold the brush, just so. How to let the wrist lead, not the fingers. "Write how the mint smells," she says, not the word, what it feels like. You pause, then you try. Your first character is clumsy. The line's too thick, and the second is better. The third surprises you, it's almost elegant. You don't know what you've written exactly, but it feels right. Mistress Wei takes a look. This one means lingering. That's a good start. The quiet is thick and golden now. The temple gongs have stopped for the day. The cats are curled near the brazier. A breeze ruffles the tops of the garden walls, and you catch the faintest trace of plum blossom carried from who knows where. You light another lantern and place it near the corner of the garden, where the lemon balm grows in tight, eager clumps. Its leaves shimmer in the light, grateful for the attention. Mistress Wei unfolds a woven mat on the stone path and sets out a small wooden box of her own ink scrolls, an old knife, and a pouch of dried persimmon slices. She hands you one. "They take time," she says, "to make, to chew, both good qualities in a person." You sit in companionable silence, chewing slowly as the lanterns flicker against the dark. The stars begin to peek through the ink-black sky, faint at first, then more confidently, like children being coaxed onto a stage. "I used to think the stars were holes in the sky," Mistress Wei says, "where the old gods peered through to check on their gardens." You glance up. Maybe they're watching now. She stands slowly, joints cracking like old bamboo. "There's something I want to show you." You follow her to the back of the garden where an old sliding panel, half hidden by creeping vines, groans open to reveal a narrow, dusty room. Inside, shelves upon shelves of ancient herbal scrolls. Some rolled tightly and tied with silk cords. Others stacked neatly with handwritten labels. A few are brittle with age, their edges yellowed and curling. It smells like earth and tea and memory. A sleepy-looking cat blinks at you from a basket in the corner, then promptly returns to sleep. "These were left by the monk before me," she says, running a hand across a stack, and the one before him. "This place forgets no one." You're not sure if she means the garden or the scrolls or something larger. She hands you one of the older rolls. You untie it carefully and unroll the top half. There, in faded ink, is a detailed sketch of a plant you recognize, angelica, but with careful notes around the root system, written in a hand much smaller and tidier than Mistress Wei's. Beside the sketch is a poem. You read it slowly as 'tis aloud. "Beneath the soil, a curl of strength, quiet as breath, deep as dusk, the body forgets what the root remembers." Mistress Wei nods. He was a quiet one, that monk, but his medicine always worked. You return the scroll gently to the shelf and take one last look around. This room isn't large, and yet it feels like it could hold whole generations. As you slide the panel closed behind you, the garden welcomes you again. The night is deep now, the lamps glowing steady, and the breeze soft as spun cotton. You sit once more beside the trays, now full of dried herbs and promise. And as you run your fingers through the brittle petals and curled leaves, you realize you're not just preparing medicine anymore. You're becoming part of a story, quiet, steady, useful, kind that only blooms when no one is watching. The cat finds you before the morning does. It presses a paw into your ribs with all the solemn weight of a royal decree. You crack one eye open, greeted by its unimpressed expression, part accusation, part expectation. Clearly, you've overslept. Mistress Wei is already outside pouring water into the stone basin, her robe sleeves tied up. She doesn't look at you when she speaks.
"I told you not to leave the scroll room door cracked open." He thinks he owns it now.
You bow theatrically to the cat. "Your Highness," you whisper, and it promptly turns and struts away, tail high. Mistress Wei chuckles but says nothing more. She hands you a fresh cloth and points to the herb trays. They're ready for storage, and I think it's time you label them. You kneel beside the drying stand and begin folding the crisp mint leaves into small paper packets. You've learned the creases by heart now, one fold for breath, one for warmth, one for keeping. She gives you a bamboo brush and a tiny inkwell.
"I won't tell you the characters," she says. "Write what the herbs feel like today."
You hesitate, then begin. The brush tip dances with more confidence than it did before. Your labels aren't perfect, but they carry the weight of your hand. When you finish the last one, honeysuckle, you glance up. She nods. The lines are crooked, but the feeling is right. After breakfast, warm barley porridge and slices of pickled turnip, you decide to spend the day in the scroll room. Mistress Wei lets you go without question. She seems to know when the garden needs hands and when a mind needs wandering. The cat follows. The scroll room smells like the inside of a question, dry and dusty, but full of purpose. You light a small oil lamp and settle onto the floor with a pile of unread scrolls. The cat curls up beside a stack and begins snoring like a tiny gong. You unroll a scroll labelled only with the character for summer. Inside is a handwritten record of herbs gathered over 3 weeks in the nearby foothills, notes on wild mugwort, pine needle resin, and something called sleep flower that only blooms at the 7th bell. Each note ends with a tiny sketch of the plant and a line of personal reflection. Too bitter for tonic, but the bees love it. Reminds me of my teacher's robes, dry and full of secrets. Collected at sunrise, the leaves sighed when I picked them. You lose track of time. The scrolls begin to feel less like study and more like conversation across centuries. One voice speaks through ink, and your quiet curiosity answers. You find one scroll tied in red string. You almost don't open it. It feels too personal. But curiosity wins. Inside are pressed petals, long since faded, and a short passage written in a slanted, unsure hand. She laughed when I gave her the sachet, said it smelled like rain on warm stone. That was the last time. You read it twice, then roll it up slowly, reverently, and return it to its place. Mistress Wei finds you sometime after the sun has shifted past the garden wall. "Good," she says, "seeing the open scrolls? I hoped you'd find the room useful." You hesitate. "Was that your writing?" you ask gently. She smiles but doesn't answer. Instead, she places a small wooden box in front of you. "For your blends," she says, "yeah, it's time you had one of your own." Inside are 3 empty porcelain jars, each no larger than your fist, a tiny wooden spoon, and a single brush, still new, waiting to know your hand. That evening, you sit in the garden, deciding what your first blend will be. The cat stretches across your lap, a warm weight. You sip chrysanthemum tea and watch the shadows lengthen. You decide on a calming mixture: dried honeysuckle, mint, and just a pinch of fennel. You call it Lantern Rest. You write the name slowly, carefully, onto a square of mulberry paper and paste it to the jar.
And just like that, it becomes real.
Later, as the last lantern flickers low and the moon slips behind a cloud, you close the scroll room door tightly this time, but not before whispering. "Good night, little archive. Dream sweetly." And you swear the cat winks at you before it disappears into the shadows. The morning brings a new kind of energy, bustling, light and fragrant. Mistress Wei has already draped long strands of marigold and lotus petals along the garden fence. Tiny sachets of herbs hang from red cords, swaying gently in the breeze. Even the cats seem unusually cooperative, lounging without knocking anything over. "Festival week," she announces, tugging your sleeve into place. "No more quiet. The city's waking up." You can feel it too, the buzz in the air. From beyond the temple walls come snatches of drumbeats, laughter, and clattering wheels. Somewhere, someone is practicing a flute scale, stumbling over the same note again and again. The Wild Ghost Festival is approaching, a time when the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead thins just enough to hear footsteps that aren't yours. The people of Chang'an prepare not with fear, but with hospitality lanterns for guidance, food for offering, and scent to soothe wandering spirits. Mistress Wei hands you a bundle of dried herbs, mugwort, patchouli, clove. These are for the garlands. Protection, clarity, and kindness. You thread the herbs into wreaths with silk ribbon and dried citrus peel. Each one becomes a soft prayer, not shouted or sung, but whispered into leaves.
As you work, she tells you that every house prepares something different. Some families burn paper clothes or shoes for their ancestors to wear in the next world. Others light incense for 7 days straight. And some, like this garden, make sachets and garlands not to keep spirits away, but to welcome them gently.
They were here before us, she says, and they'll be here long after. You help tie a row of tiny sachets to the entrance gate. The breeze lifts them slightly, as if unseen hands were checking their contents. After lunch, sticky rice with red beans and candied jujube, you join Mistress Wei in the temple kitchen. She pulls out a collection of pressed herbs and suggests you create a blend for the festival. One that honors memory and invites calm. You think carefully, sifting through the scents and textures you've come to know.
Eventually you choose
Osmanthus, wood for sweetness and remembering, angelica root for grounding and the body's strength, ginger for warmth because even spirits like to feel welcome. Mistress Wei nods approvingly. Name it. You hesitate, then write Night Bridge for that invisible crossing between the living and the remembered. The sachets are filled and stitched closed with red thread. You make 5 and hang one on your own sash. It feels different from the others you've worn closer to the heart. In the afternoon, children from a neighbouring street are allowed into the garden to help prepare flower bundles. They giggle when you show them how to twist ribbon around stalks of lemongrass. And one boy insists on calling you Herb Master, even though his wreath ends up looking like a confused bird nest. Mistress Wei watches with a bemused expression. Be careful, she says. The garden likes to keep the ones who make it laugh. One of the girls offers you a tiny paper lantern. She's painted with ink dots. Stars, she explains, in case the spirits get lost. You thank her and place it by the basin. Evening falls quickly, as if the sky is eager to join the celebration. The temple begins lighting lanterns along the walls, their orange glow pooling in the stone paths. From inside, a slow gong chimes 7 times the threshold hour. Mistress Wei offers a single plate of food on a tray rice, mushrooms, a slice of salted pear. She sets it on the edge of the garden wall. For guests who don't knock, she says, bowing slightly. You both sit in the quiet that follows, sipping tea infused with lotus root and fennel. A breeze moves through the garden, brushing the sachets, rustling the petals, shifting the shadows, and for a moment, the air changes just slightly, as though someone unseen had walked gently through, smiling faintly, and left again. Mistress Wei looks at you. Did you feel that? You nod, like memory. She smiles. Then the blend worked. You stay outside longer than usual, watching the lanterns sway and the moon rise, full and clean, somewhere beyond the city. A chorus of voices sings a song in a dialect you don't know, but you understand the feeling. Gratitude, reunion, stillness.
Later, back in your room, you untie the sachet from your sash and hold it to your face. It smells like warmth and roots, and something that might be home.
The morning after the Ghost Festival feels hushed, but not empty like a room recently departed by kind guests. Mistress Wei moves more slowly today, her sleeves rolled down, her steps deliberate. She doesn't say much as you share breakfast rice porridge with sesame paste, a boiled egg, and slices of pickled lotus root. Today, she says, finally, you make something all your own. She hands you a pouch of dried herbs. Not her selection, yours to be too late. The blend you named Night Bridge. You've walked the garden, tasted the teas, crushed the roots, hung the wreaths. You've listened more than most do in a lifetime. She smiles. Now you blend for someone else. You feel the weight of it, not pressure, but purpose. In the garden's shaded corner, you unroll your mat, gather your tools, the small mortar, a cloth, your now well-worn brush. You light a single stick of sandalwood incense and let the smoke spiral. The cat arrives, sits exactly on your notes, and blinks slowly as if to say, "Well, begin." You decide to make something calming, but not sleepy, something that grounds without dulling. You think of sage warm for clarity, lemon balm for brightness, dried osmanthus. Again, for warmth. You crush them gently, listening to the sound, the soft shush of petal against pestle, the faint pop of seeds splitting.
As the blend takes shape, so does its name.
You dip your brush in ink and write quiet earth, for stillness that holds you without asking questions. You package the herbs into a small ceramic jar and carry it to the temple's front courtyard, where visitors sometimes stop to speak with the monks or share a cup of tea. There's someone there already, a scholar in travel-worn robes, sitting cross-legged under the plum tree, rubbing a sore wrist. You hesitate. Mistress Wei, who has appeared without a sound, nudges you forward, offer it gently. You kneel beside him, introduce yourself, and explain briefly that the blend helps when thoughts are tangled, or the body forgets how to settle. You expect polite thanks. Instead, the scholar looks at the jar for a long time. Then he smiles.
My teacher used to make something like this, he says, only with cardamom. He called it study tea. Yours smelled more forgiving.
You sit beside him as he opens the jar and breathes in the scent. You tell him about the garden, the scroll room, even the cat. He listens carefully, nodding in the quiet way of someone who's been starved for slowness. When he leaves an hour later, he presses a folded piece of paper into your palm. Later, you read it. Your tea is gentle. Your garden is wise. Your time is not wasted. You place the note in your box beside the jar labelled Lantern Rest. That afternoon, you and Mistress Wei begin preparing for the final harvest of the season. She shows you how to check for the signs, the yellowing of mint leaves, the dryness at the root of angelica, the way the honeysuckle releases from the stem with no resistance.
This is what we wait for, she says. Not perfection, readiness.
You nod, and the meaning settles somewhere behind your ribs. The rest of the day is spent gathering carefully mint, lemon balm, chrysanthemum buds that have just begun to tighten into their final shape. You tie the bundles with quiet reverence, not because they're rare, but because they've chosen to be ready.
As the sun tilts westward, you carry the baskets into the drying shed. The cat follows, of course, and curls beside the warm wall.
You sit for a long while, watching the light play through the trellis, casting lace-like shadows across the floor. And you wonder if someone from your old life met you now. Would they recognize you?
Would you...
Or would they meet a quiet stranger who smells faintly of sage and carries stillness in their pocket like a treasured stone? Mistress Wei walks past and places a cup beside you, just hot water with mint. Nothing else.
No name this time, she says. Just taste. And you do. And it is enough.
The morning mist rolls in like a secret. It gathers along the garden's stone edges, pools in the hollows between herb beds, and blurs the line between leaf and sky. You step into it barefoot, your robe damp at the hem within minutes, but the coolness is welcome. Soft, refreshing, a slow inhale made visible. Today is the final harvest, Mistress Wei says, and you can feel it in the stillness of the air. The plants seem to know too. Their colors are deeper, their scents more concentrated. The garden has ripened. You begin with the mint. The leaves are smaller now, but stronger, in smell sharp and clean, like the very definition of clarity. You pinch gently at the stems, careful not to bruise them, laying each bundle into a low basket lined with silk. Mistress Wei works beside you in silence.
After a while, she speaks, not looking up. What we harvest today will last through winter. What we forget will be lost.
You nod, feeling the weight of that not just in gardening, but in everything. In memory, in people, in time. Next comes the honeysuckle. Its trumpet-shaped flowers release a fragrance that clings to your fingers and refuses to be washed away. You breathe it in slowly, letting it settle somewhere behind your eyes. The final herb is perilla. Tall, broad leaves with deep purple undersides and a spicy, almost citrusy scent. Mistress Wei hands you a thin blade and gestures for you to cut from the base. The stalks give with a soft snap, and you realize this plant has been growing all along in the garden's far corner, waiting patiently. Not everything needs attention to thrive, she says, but even the quiet ones deserve to be seen. As you carry the bundles to the drying racks, you feel the ache of satisfaction, the kind that comes not from finishing, but from tending. You've touched every part of this garden now, and it has shaped you in return. While the herbs begin to dry, Mistress Wei prepares one last meal to mark the day: steamed buns stuffed with mushrooms and wild chive, ginger broth, and slices of fresh pear. You eat on the stone steps of the temple kitchen, the sun beginning to warm the courtyard walls. She watches you carefully. You could stay, she says, almost casually. There is always room for one more gardener. You pause, bun halfway to your mouth.
I've thought about it, you admit.
She smiles. Good. Thinking is where leaving begins. But staying is a choice made with the body. Later, she hands you a square of linen and a small brush.
Write one last label.
You hesitate.
Not for the jar, she says, for the season.
You think for a long time before you write it. The characters come slowly, but with certainty.
Enough.
Mistress Wei looks at it, then nods. Well said. That evening, you carry the last batch of herbs into the scroll room. The cat is already waiting, sprawled atop a crate of dried lotus pods, tail twitching like a metronome. You place the bundles carefully onto the shelves, next to jars labelled with blends you now know by scent alone. You light a single oil lamp and sit on the floor with your journal, not to write instruction, or recipes, or names, just to sit, to let the moment stretch.
A soft knock at the door.
Mistress Wei enters, holding something wrapped in cloth.
A gift, she says. Inside, a small inkstone, a travel brush, and a folded sachet stitched with your name.
For wherever the road leads, she says, even if it's only back here. The garden outside has quieted. The mist is gone. The sky is streaked with peach and lavender. You look around the scroll room one last time, its gentle clutter, its ancient corners, its smell of pressed memory. And for a moment, you feel the deep pulse of something rooted and calm. Not an ending. Just a long, full breath. You step outside, pouch tied to your sash, brush in your sleeve, stillness in your bones. The last light of day filters through the mint leaves and lands gently on your face. And somewhere in the city, a bell rings not loudly, but with purpose. You close your eyes and smile.
You are ready.
The osmanthus tree is in bloom. Its pale yellow flowers have begun to scatter across the garden path like bits of fragrant snow, soft and star-shaped. They crunch faintly beneath your sandals as you walk the morning circuit, checking the herb trays, rinsing the stone basin, greeting the still sleepy cats. Mistress Wei stands beneath the tree already, brushing fallen blossoms into a woven tray. She doesn't look up as you approach, just gestures for you to join her.
You've seen this tree bloom before, she says, but never like this.
You glance upward. The branches are full, heavy with tiny flowers. The air is thick with their perfume. Something between apricot, warm tea, and the memory of someone brushing past you in a crowd. It blooms once a year, she adds, when the days are still warm, but the nights remember the cold. The balance is brief. You gather the blossoms carefully, letting them rain into your palms, soft as whispers. You think of every section of this story, each moment spent kneeling, brewing, writing, laughing. It feels like they were all leading here. You help spread the blossoms on silk for drying, gently shaking the tray so they lie in a single, even layer. Later, you'll infuse tea with them, or make a sleep sachet, or maybe just keep them as they are, a memory that smells like gold. Today is your last full day in the garden. You don't speak it aloud. You don't need to. The garden knows. Even the cats seem more affectionate than usual, trailing you between trays and rubbing against your ankles like living commas, asking you to pause. You spend the afternoon slowly, deliberately. You dust the scroll shelves. You sweep the corners of the courtyard. You refill the incense bowl in the small shrine with fresh ash and a single stick of camphor wood. The smoke rises clean and clear. Mistress Wei hands you your box now, full. Inside are your jars, your brush, a fresh roll of paper, the 2 clay whistles from the market which you'd almost forgotten, and the folded note from the travelling scholar. It feels heavy in your hands, but not burdensome.
Keep tending, she says softly, even if you're far from soil.
That evening, the 2 of you share a final cup of osmanthus tea beneath the tree. The lanterns sway gently in the garden's last breath of warmth. The moon is pale and round, just cresting the roof tiles. Mistress Wei watches you closely. You'll forget things, she says, not because you want to, but because time has its own garden, and not all seeds bloom at once.
You nod.
But you'll remember the important parts. You'll remember the slowness, the way mint curls when it dries, the smell of steam rising from a bowl of dumplings, the sound of one bell in a quiet city. You finish your tea. Stars begin to appear, shyly, like children peeking through curtains. Mistress Wei stands and brushes imaginary dust from her sleeves. "Come now," she says. "There's one more thing." She leads you to the garden gate and opens it. Beyond is the alley, dim, quiet, familiar.
You can go now, she says at it.
You look back at the garden, the trays, the herbs, the basin, the tree.
And you realise that you're not saying goodbye to a place.
You're saying thank you to a part of yourself you finally met. Mistress Wei bows to you low, slow, respectful. You return the gesture. And then, with the softest steps, you walk out beneath the night sky. The cat watches from the gatepost, tail flicking like a slow metronome. Just as you reach the bend in the alley, you hear her voice behind you one last time. "Don't forget to boil water." You smile.
You won't. And now the road quiets.
The alley fades into shadow behind you. The stone path softened by moonlight, and the last flickers of lantern glow melt into the distance. Your footsteps are slower now, not from fatigue, but from fullness. Each step carries the warmth of jasmine tea, the memory of mint beneath your nails, the silent wisdom of a garden that never rushed you. You walk with your hands tucked into your sleeves, the cloth sachet gently pressing against your chest, filled with the scent of dried blossoms and calm. There is no destination ahead, just stillness unfolding. Above, the stars have gathered, not in a rush, just arriving like old friends. One by one, they scatter themselves across the velvet sky. A soft breeze lifts your hair and brushes your cheek with the gentleness of a memory. You pause by a low stone wall, resting your hands upon its cool surface. You inhale deeply, and the air tastes of earth and time. No noise, no task, no urgency. The city sleeps. And in its dreaming, it lets you go slowly, lovingly, without resistance. You close your eyes. The body softens by the breath evens. The thoughts stretch out, long and loose and quiet.
And somewhere behind you, an osmanthus blossom falls.
You don't hear it, but the garden does.